Chapter 7 Day 1, 1300 Hours. Cameron, Bernard, and Maria stepped back into the woods. Their weapons were shouldered, and they kept their eyes peeled for both animals and enemies. As they silently walked from the walled-off entrance and past the trees, Bernard finally turned to Cameron and spoke.
"Mr. Cameron, thank you for coming with us," he gently said with his soft tone. "Tell me, my friend, have you remembered anything yet?"
Cameron recalled hearing the voices in his head earlier, those he had assumed were his mother and father. He nodded slightly.
"Yeah, but only the smallest of things. I think, my parents talking to me."
"Yes, that is how it begins."
Bernard nodded as Cameron spoke.
"Or rather, that was how it began for me. I remembered voices, brief images, but never saw anything that stuck significantly. It wasn't until I reached level 5 that I saw and felt the first true memory of my real life."
"What did you see?" Cameron asked.
"I saw..."
Bernard cleared his throat and looked away for a moment.
"I saw Mogadishu, 1993.
"Wait, Mogadishu?" Cameron repeated. "You mean like the movie?"
"Friend, it was unlike any movie," Bernard corrected. "The screams of my countrymen, the blood that flowed through the streets. I was young then. I believed in Mohammed Farah Aidid, that he would give us a better future. I remember the feelings, friend, the hate I felt toward the Americans, the Malaysians, the Pakistani. They did not belong there. Somalia was not their fight."
Bernard turned his head and spit vehemently, and then closed his eyes for a moment.
"I remembered my friends, so many of them being massacred by so few of you. The fight lasted only one day, and it is all I remember, but I do not feel hate anymore. I do not think I am a hateful person. I look at you, I see your white skin, your blonde hair, and I see a brother, for even you, my friend, were created by Allah, and you are precious and valuable, just like everyone. For Allah himself said that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole people. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of the whole people. Here, on this island, I have to fight, but also I have to save the people. I have to make sure others live, that I too may live. You see, Mr. Cameron, it is all about balance. I cannot survive without you or Maria, and you cannot survive without me or the others. Our lives justify each other's. We are dependent on each other. God has made it this way." "I'm glad you found me, Bernard," Maria sweetly chirped. "Without you, I would have died back in the city. The things I have remembered so far, they make me never want to earn another intelligence point again."
"Intelligence point?" Cameron asked. "What does that have to do with anything?"
"I have gathered that the more points you spend on the intelligence attribute," Bernard answered, "the more memories you unlock or are sensitive to. It is just a theory, but I as a builder focus on the vitality attribute. However, every level I earn, I also earn an intelligence point automatically. It was retroactive from when I chose my class at level 5. When I did, I suddenly had 5 intelligence, and that was when I received my first big memory."
"What level are you now?" Cameron asked.
"I am level 8, Bernard replied. "If things go as I expect, then in 2 more levels, I will receive my next major memory."
"Oh my God," Cameron whispered. "So you said you got 1 extra intelligence point per level and that it's retroactive, right?"
"Yes, Mr. Cameron," Bernard nodded.
"But your class is based off the vitality stat."
"Yes. Every level I gain, I obtain 1 stat point to distribute as I desire. On top of that, however, I receive 3 points in vitality, 2 in strength, and 1 in intelligence. I receive no bonuses to dexterity." "Yes, that's how it works," Maria agreed. "I get 3 in dexterity, 1 in intelligence, and 1 in strength, but none in vitality."
"So wait,
You guys are telling me that when I hit level 5, I will retroactively get 3 points in whatever stat the class I choose favors? Cameron asked.
Yes, Bernard nodded. If you select Builder, for instance, you will automatically receive 15 points in Vitality, 5 in Intelligence, and 10 in Strength.
Oh man. Cameron realized that once he hit level 5 and selected his class, he was suddenly going to have 20 points in Intelligence. Based on what Bernard was saying, that meant he was going to have 4 major memories. Cameron wasn't sure he was ready for that.
Do not worry, Mr. Cameron, Bernard said soothingly. The level 5 transformation has been interesting for everyone. Well, except for Derek, who gets no intelligence points. You have us to support you, my friend.
Cameron felt anxious about regaining any of his memories. What kind of person had he been back in the real world that compelled him to want to come to a place like Happy Island? The idea was disconcerting, to say the least.
There, ahead, Bernard suddenly whispered as he crouched down. A deer. That will be enough to feed everyone. Do you see it?
Cameron crouched down and squinted his eyes. Ahead of them in the bushes he could see the head of a doe peeking out and munching on the leaves of a low-hanging branch. Cameron felt the urge to raise his shotgun, but experience told him that shooting the animal from this distance with that kind of weapon would potentially spoil the meat. Instead, Maria raised her rifle and zeroed in on the animal. Something spooked it, and it ran. Maria cursed and lowered her gun as she jumped to her feet.
Come on,
she called back to the others.
This way.
Cameron and Bernard hurried behind Maria as she tracked the doe deeper into the woods.
She has a skill that can illuminate the tracks of her prey, Bernard told Cameron. She can follow it more effectively than even the best hunter back in the real world.
That's handy, Cameron said as they made their way through the brush. Bernard nodded silently in agreement, and suddenly Maria came to a stop. The others slowed down behind her, and she raised a hand to signal them to remain still.
Got it,
she whispered as she raised her rifle. She quickly fired, and the doe cried out and dropped to the ground as the bullet passed through her heart. Maria smiled and turned back toward the men.
Piece of cake. Very good, Miss Maria, Bernard sang. You are truly a valuable asset to this party.
The trio walked over to examine the dead deer, and Bernard nodded gleefully.
This will suffice,
he said. With a grunt, he hoisted the animal over his shoulders and began to carry it fireman style.
Let us get back to the camp,
Bernard said as he began to walk in the direction they had come from.
The others will surely.
The sound of a weapon suddenly discharging in the distance could be heard. Bernard stopped walking and his eyes grew wide. He silently turned and looked at Maria for a moment.
Did you hear that?
He asked.
Gunshot, Maria replied, coming from the cave.
Suddenly it sounded like a war zone had erupted in the near distance. Guns were firing, explosions rocking the air. Cameron saw the vital indicators of his party mates on the right side of his vision begin to tremble. He watched as red X's began to rapidly cover their faces, and Bernard quickly dropped the deer and raised his rifle.
We need to go help them,
he shouted. Cameron shouldered his shotgun and Maria her rifle, and the trio began to sprint toward the caverns. Not a word was spoken as they hurried back toward their camp. Cameron kept an eye on the vitals and saw that nearly everyone had an X through their portraits. He wondered if that meant they had been knocked or killed. As portraits began disappearing, he realized that the X meant knocked, and the vanishing meant they were dead. They were at least 20 minutes out from the camp, and by the time they arrived, only their portraits and one other remained. They found cover in the tree line outside the cavern. For a moment they watched. There were 2 sets of fresh tire tracks in the dirt in front of the cave. Whoever had come had driven there, and they were gone. Seeing this, Bernard got to his feet and hurried through the entrance of their cave with Cameron and Maria close behind. The torches still burned. There were new cots lying on the ground, and a fire pit had been constructed in the middle of everything, but bodies were everywhere. Blood painted the walls and the ground. Bernard looked around in horror, and his eyes welled up with tears.
Derek!
Bernard shouted as he hurried forward.
Derek, are you okay?
Derek sat on the ground with his forearms resting on his knees and his head lowered. He had no weapon, no armor, only his starter clothes. He looked up at the others with a defeated look and shook his head.
Go back, Derek croaked. Guys, y'all have to get out of here.
His southern drawl was full of despair.
Derek, we would never dream of leaving you.
Bernard argued as he approached his friend.
Come, get on your feet. Let us...
I can't move,
Derek insisted.
I'm sitting on a pressure trap. If I get up, it'll explode and we'll all die.
No, Bernard argued. We can fix this. We can deactivate it. Maria, what do you think?
I see it, Maria sighed. His level is beyond my own. I don't have the ability to deactivate the trap. If I try, it could explode and kill us all.
See, Derek somberly said. Ain't nothing we can do about this, Bernie. You three, y'all just need to get out of here while you still can.
Derek, there must be a way.
Bernard knelt down and placed his palm on his friend's cheek. Derek in turn began to cry.
No, Bernie. It's the end of the road for me.
Derek sobbed.
This is just... Everyone dies here, Bernard. We're never safe. Hell, this is the first damn day and I've already seen so much death. Bernie, I don't want to be a part of this world anymore. You gotta go.
Derek, my friend.
Bernard sighed as he trembled.
Is there anything I can do for you to make this more comfortable?
No.
Derek shook his head.
It was great meeting you, Bernie. You made this all so much better, but I just need to sit here and find my peace.
Then I shall pray for you.
Bernard touched his forehead to Derek's for a moment as the two wept together.
I am sorry, Derek.
Bernard stood up and wiped the tears from his eyes. Derek looked up at him.
Thank you, he said, for coming back at least. You're a good man, Bernie.
So are you, Derek.
Bernard smiled thinly.
I will see you again one day.
At that, Bernard walked toward Cameron and Maria. Maria somberly lifted her hand toward Derek, and he waved back. The trio slowly walked toward the entrance of the cave. Bernard could not help but look at everyone as he passed them.
This is my fault,
Bernard whispered as the three walked out into the sunlight.
I should have let Derek come with us.
If I had,
then somebody else would be sitting on that bomb, and you'd feel just as bad.
Maria finished his sentence.
Bernard, you can't blame yourself. You just have to keep going.
Bernard fell silent, and the three of them walked back into the tree line. Their anxiety intensified and spread over all of them as they waited for the explosion that would tear Derek's body apart. As they silently walked, Cameron reflected on the world that he had found himself in. Only an hour before, he was thrilled about finding so many people who were willing to take him in. He was ready to work with them, to grow with them. He saw himself winning the game with them at his side. But then, they were all suddenly gone. The trio wandered into the forest, broken by the loss of their party. Bernard did not say a word. The ever-present hope seemed to have faded from his face. Maria wept silently to herself, and Cameron couldn't help but expect the worst. Why did he continue to live while everyone else died? He looked over at Bernard and Maria and wondered when he would lose them too. The thought was scary and upsetting, but Cameron felt like he was growing just a little bit more numb to it. As the sound of an explosion blasted into their ears, all three of them suddenly stopped walking and sat down. They were all so suddenly exhausted by everything. Bernard sniffled and laid his head back. He did not say a word, did not look at either of them. He only stared up at the canopy for a moment, and then he closed his eyes and fell asleep.